Welcome back to the show. I'm here with author of the Tara Trilogy, Mahtab Narsimhan. Mahtab, nice to have you on the show with us.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Chris.
Great, yeah. And we're here to talk about your books. You've got a trilogy. That's quite the undertaking. Not just to write one book, but to write three. A story that spans three novels. Give us a little bit of information about The Third Eye, which is the first in the series.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, The Third Eye was my absolute first venture when I started writing the books, and it took me about 4 years to write. I'd never written a book before. You know, there are no authors in my family, but it's just the entire thing started with the death of my dad, and you know, this was in 2003, and books had always taken me through the entire process of dealing with a very difficult situation.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I was always an avid reader, but then that's when I got the idea of, you know what, I'm going to try and write a book. And I tried. It was really, really hard. It took me about, as I said, 4 years to be able to start writing it and end up, you know, getting it published.
Wow.
A lot of rejections on the way, over 100, and there were many, many times that I wanted to give up, but perseverance and chocolate got me through.
Chocolate too, as well. You gotta give credit where credit's deserved. That's funny. So, as far as the 4 years span, was that just to get the first book, or are you talking the whole trilogy?
Oh no, just the first book.
Wow.
Just the first
4
book.
years.
Yeah, because there was so much to learn. You know, when you're writing, you don't realize, sometimes when you pick up a book and you really love it, you just kind of think, oh, you know what, I like this book, but you don't know why. And to really figure out, there's actually a science to it. Of course, there is the creativity, but there's also the science of how a chapter ends, how it begins, you know, the pacing, the characterization. You cannot have, sometimes you hear people say, you know what, oh, this was a flat character, because they're either too good or they're too bad, and they're not human. So, you know, to learn how to do the plotting and the pacing and the characterization, that took me a very long time to learn. And I had to join a critique group, learn a lot on my own, read a lot of good books and bad books to try and figure that out. And that's why the first one took 4 years, the second one took about a year, and surprisingly, the third one took about 3 months.
Wow.
Yes,
there
because
you go.
by that time I kind of
knew
what I was doing. Yeah.
That's great. And speaking of the second and third, we've got The Silver Anklet and as the second book, and then we've got an advanced copy here of The Deadly Conch.
Yes, and that's coming out in February next year.
That's great. And it's a trilogy, so you know, are we talking the same characters and the same sort of storyline?
Pretty much.
Interwoven through all three?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Now, your inspiration, it was mythology, was it not?
Yes.
And let's talk about that inspiration. I wanted to, you know, I did want to ask you about the book writing process, and if you, before we get into the mythology, did you, before learning all the technicalities of storytelling and characters, characterization, did you get into the writing of the book, or did you say, no, I'm not even going to go there yet until I learn all of the sort of the technical aspects of writing a story?
Right. Well, no, you just start writing the book. For me, I have to write the first draft, and that's like, you know, it took me about 6 to 8 months to write the first draft. You just write it. It's like you just pour it all out on paper, you know, with lots of grammatical errors, everything. For me, the first thing is telling the story to yourself. And then once you have told the story to yourself, that's when you start putting it together and you tell the story to the reader, to the potential reader. So that's when I started learning the technical aspects of what works and what doesn't. And it initially started out with being almost 68 to 70,000 words. By the time I'd cut and chopped and polished it, it was down to about 52,000 words. So, you know, the thing is that you first write the story and then you start figuring it out of how you're going to polish it and make it better.
Yeah. Did you have the idea for a trilogy right from the get-go?
You know what? Actually, no. You know, the surprising part was I'd decided this was going to be a 2-part book. And that is why, if you notice out here, there is no Tara Trilogy. It doesn't say that. When I finished the second book, I figured out, you know what, I've got so much more material, I think I'm going to be able to write the third one. And that's why the second and the third one actually do have the trilogy, because that's when I decided, okay, you know what, it's going to be 3. And I think good stuff comes in 3s.
There you go. They say that. They do. So, okay, now let's get into your inspiration and the stories that you're talking about here and the themes. Tell us about that.
Well, I have always loved fantasy. I just, you know, I loved Lord of the Rings. I love Harry Potter. I grew up, you know, on Enid Blyton, which is a British author. I mean, not many people in North America have heard of her, but when we were back in India, that was my staple of reading. And she, you know, so I grew up with magic and goblins and elves and that kind of stuff. So I always loved that stuff. And the Indian mythology is, again, extremely rich. The Indian culture is very rich. Again, not in large chunks, but in smaller, you know, little bits and pieces. So I just wanted to put all of that love of fantasy, adventure, Indian mythology, Indian culture, and a really good story all together, and that's where the inspiration came from. And of course, the storyline changed a lot from the time that I first wrote it to when it got published.
Was that difficult, coming up with an original story and sort of weaving that in with mythology that many people familiar with Indian culture would recognize?
You know what? I have got a very good imagination. Sometimes it's bad, because you can imagine stuff that's not there.
Oh, but really?
Yes.
We need another segment for that one. Well.
Yes. So, in a way, for creativity or storytelling, imagination is really good. So I've never had a problem with that.
Yeah.
But no, it was not hard coming up with a story. It's just sometimes there is so much, you have to figure out how to stay focused and not go all over the place.
Okay.
So writing it was not a problem at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we probably piqued the curiosity of a lot of our viewers because we've talked about the process of writing the book, the fact that there's a trilogy. Give us a little taste of the story and where the adventure readers can go on.
All right. So, well, the overarching theme of this story is about believing in yourself. So I have this really young protagonist, Tara, who has, in the very first book, she has to face her worst nightmares and she has to triumph over them. So that is the first one. In the second one, we've got, it's called the Silver Anklet. So there is this mystery of the Silver Anklet. There is, of course, the villain, and there is a deadly game of hide and seek, which if she and her companions lose, it means they're going to die.
Right.
And she has to make some really, really tough choices.
Okay.
And in the third book, it's again believing in yourself to triumph over the worst things that could possibly happen to you when no one else believes in you, not even your family.
Oh, wow.
And that is basically the overarching theme. But it's just a fun adventure. I really loved writing it, and I do hope the readers love reading it.
That's great, yeah. And it sounds like an inspiring story that everybody can take lessons from. Now, speaking of everybody, is it written for all ages? And all?
Well, it's mainly middle grade. So I would say, grades 4, 5, 6, or ages 9 to 12.
Okay.
But I have had adult readers, fans write to me, and especially when the first one was nominated for the Silver Birch, I had a lot of adult fans who were running the book programs, also saying, you know what, we loved it today. My family is not getting dinner because I've been reading the book all day.
There you go.
So that was kind of neat.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
That was very nice. And yeah, you mentioned the Silver Birch Award, which congratulations.
Thank
and
you.
that was for the first book, The Third Eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, it was a pleasure having you on the show with us.
Thanks
Thanks very much for talking about your books, and all the best.
Pleasure being here.
Yeah, thank you. For more information, you go to www.mahtabnarsimhan.com. And when we come back, Val will be in the kitchen cooking with personal chef Jono. Stay tuned.